Everybody hear me well? Awesome. So thanks, Melanie, for that great presentation. We're going to do a little bit of a flip when it comes to Yooz, as we are handling everything that's related to AP automation. So the other side, basically, of the spectrum. So today I wanted to present you with how you can automate your AP process for Business Central customers with Yooz. What's the most important when it comes to AP automation? The value that our customers do get from automating that part of the business is that they end up processing their invoices faster, reducing the manual touches as well as the time spent by the accounting specialists or the controllers in the team, scale the business without hiring any more headcounts, as well as reducing any potential fraud that may happen from malicious invoices that we try to get inside the system. So today I wanted to show you two slides before we actually get inside the demo. And the first one is just to tell you a little bit about Yooz, and then we'll look at the typical workflow that happens inside the tool. So Yooz, we are originally a French company. We have locations over in France as well as in the US. So we handle any North American customers as well as Latin customers. Born in the cloud in 2010, we have over 7,000 clients. And one point that would be important for you guys to remember is that we do reinvest 25% of our revenue in R&D to keep the product as relevant to you guys' needs as possible. Now, when it comes to the workflow, this is a very quick overview of what we're going to be doing inside the application itself. The idea is to automate the entire process. So everything starts on the left-hand side. If your business requires purchase orders, that's something that we can import within Yooz. Either receive them in Yooz or you guys can receive them in Business Central, and then they will be sitting in the background waiting for the corresponding invoice to come in and then match against it. Then the idea is going to be to capture all the invoices that you guys are receiving, either if it's by email, through vendor portals, maybe paper invoices as well. The idea is to centralize all those documents inside the applications so your team no longer have to run around and try to get them from the different sources. From there, our AI model is going to come to work, extract the data of the invoices. Something that's very important to remember is that our AI model does not require any templating, meaning that it does not matter the format or how the invoice from your vendor would look like. The system is going to read the characters and then populate the fields automatically for the team, so they will just have to review the exceptions and anomalies, which brings us to the third point, which is the review phase. Usually at that stage, when it's a PO-based invoices, the accounting specialist would make sure there is no discrepancy at the line level between the invoice and the purchase orders. We can identify discrepancies such as product code, quantities, unit price, total amounts, and then for the non-PO-based invoices, Yooz is going to remember the coding habits of the users and automatically create the GL lines for them when it comes to creating those entries. And then for the businesses that we do vendor statement reconciliation, this is also something that we can reconcile against and do the line-by-line matching, making sure that no invoice would be different from what your vendor sent you and what is actually on the statements, or there's no invoice that would be on the statement that you guys never received. Then from there, usually businesses, they like to approve invoices before they actually pay them based on different criteria. Those could be dollar amounts, could be keyword, could be GL, could be dimensions, you name it. Every business has a different way to operate. So the idea is to match those business processes that you have in-house and replicate them inside the application. And then finally, when it comes to paying, different options against are available. It is possible to pay either through virtual credit cards, ACHs, paper checks, etc. And then once all these tasks have been completed within Yooz, which is a standalone solution, then the accounting entries are going to be created in Business Central. They would come as posted. And then once the invoice is paid, the status would be updated as paid, and a remittance would be sent out to the vendor and also created inside Yooz for tracking. Finally, all the documents are going to be stored in Yooz for 7 years for financial reporting purposes. Users are going to be able to make searches from any kind of documents that would have got inside the platform. You can do searches such as specific keywords, projects, or vendors' dollar amounts. And then finally, to go on top of that searches, you can also have those reports that would be either being fed inside Power BI or extracted as a dynamic Excel report. And every action taken by a user on an actual document would be recording any audit trail that could be presented to internal, external, or external auditors as needed. All right, I'm going to jump to the actual demonstration. just so we can see that in action. And here is the second screen. So what you guys are seeing right now would be the capture space, which is the very first step that actually the second step that we look at the previous slide. So here, this is just something that we set up at the forefront on how we're going to be centralizing all those invoices from the vendor inside the application. So as I mentioned, there is the email capture box. Usually the idea is to have the AP inbox of the business or the different email addresses where you may receive invoices from your vendors and have them automatically routed inside the Yooz application. For any paper invoices that you guys may receive, a couple of options that are possible. The first ones would be to scan a document through one of the printers in the office and then send it inside the application. Or if someone's out there on the field, there is also a Yooz mobile app that can be open and take picture of documents with it and then upload it inside the application itself. And finally, at the very bottom here, we have the Fetch My Invoices. This is where we connected to over 12,000 different portals from different vendors. So let's say, for example, you would have, a Verizon, Comcast, Amazon invoice, and you have to log into those portals every single week or every single month. By authenticating yourself into those portals through Yooz, every time you would receive an invoice from that vendor, it would be automatically pulled inside the application. And then finally, in the imported files, we'll have a quick snapshot of all the documents that got recently inside the tool itself. Now, when it comes to the workflows, which is usually the most important when it comes to deciding how the documents are going to go from point A to point Z, we can have a lot of different workflows depending on the kind of documents, whether it's going to be a purchase orders, a regular invoice, a vendor statement, etc. So this is an example that a workflow that could be created in Yooz, and you have to remember that the idea is that Yooz would be adapting the platform based on your processes instead of the client having to fit into a specific box. But in this example, we have those three phases, which is the review one. And here we added a rule that says if the invoices coming from any of those vendors are listed in the dark blue box, where the dollar amount would be less than $550, and we extracted 100% of the accounting data of that invoice, then it would skip the accounting specialist and then go straight for approval. We usually have those rules when it comes to there's 100% match between the PO and the actual invoice. Those could skip the accounting specialist because they've already been validated and then go straight for approval. A question that you may have when it comes to seeing those vendors, since we have an API connection with Business Central, it means that every new dimensions or vendors or items that you may be creating in Business Central, those are going to be replicated within Yooz. So it's going to be acting like a mirror. Then once the invoices have been reviewed, we would then move on to an approval phase. So you can see here, there would be different steps and they would be all chronological. As I mentioned earlier, we can have a rule that says if there's a specific keyword, usually that would be luxury items such as Dior, Gucci, Ferrari, Rolex. Those could go to someone specific in the organization just to make sure that those expenses are going to be approved and it's not a fraudulent expense. Can have multiple approvals based on the dollar amounts or another criteria. An automatic approval if the invoice enters specific criteria that we have set up. And then by default, usually there would be someone or a set of people supposed to approve invoices based on the business unit, project, dimension, etc. Then once all the approval would have been done, let's say it may require 3 people to approve and then the third people did approve, then there would be an accounting export, and that's when we would be creating the accounting entries inside Business Central, and the invoice would come as posted. They can also come as unposted, but people would usually prefer to have them coming as posted. Just trying to move this, but it looks like I've lost my, oh, here it is. And then when it comes to payment, you could also segregate the process between one person that is supposed to approve the invoice for payment and then another person that's actually clicking pay, issuing the payment itself based on how your vendor would like to receive the funds. And then once this is done, we'll have a last accounting export, marking the bill as paid, emailing the remittance to the vendor, as well as pushing the remittance to Business Central. Now I'm going to jump to my tasks. This is when we're going to start reviewing a couple of documents. So here we're working as an accounting specialist, and this would be the main dashboards. We'll be able to track all the documents that are late, that says that they're outstanding, and we're probably supposed to work on them yesterday or the day before we didn't get to them. That's going to be easy to make sure that we don't forget any outstanding tasks. Documents that are complete, that means that we extracted 100% of the accounting data of those documents and they're ready to be sent for approval. And the ones that are blocked is whenever we find a potential duplicate, a fraud invoice, or an invoice from a vendor that does not exist in Business Central yet. Then we'd have our to-do list. So this would be all the tasks that we're supposed to be doing for the day. Here we can see that we split by organizational unit as well as document type. So we'd have a couple of non-PO based invoices to review, one PO based one, a vendor statement, as well as other like expense receipts. Here you can see on the very right that the task is review, which is the very first step that we had in the workflow. Now, if I scroll down, I can see the in progress section, and I can see that the task is now approved, and I can see who is now the recipient that's going to be in charge of approving that document. What that means from a user perspective in a day-to-day is that once I'm done with my first task as an accounting specialist, I will no longer have to send a Teams message, an email, or go to someone's desk to make sure that they actually got the documents. These people, they would receive a notification either by email on the mobile app or in the Yooz application. And then those could also be reminders as well as escalation rules to be set up if the tasks are not completed on time, meaning that the accounting specialist won't have to chase endlessly someone that needs to approve an invoice. Now, if we look at a document itself, basically, this is what it would look like. You would find the actual picture of the invoice that would be located on the right. You'd have the data that was extracted by the system on the left, and then the lines that were created as well once the AI model read what was on the actual invoice. So the first thing that we want to do from an accounting specialist perspective is to make sure that we extracted the right data from that invoice and then populate it in the right fields. So if we look at the document date, it would tell us where we picked up that value. Same for the document number. Now, when it comes to the due date on the left, there was no due date that was on the actual invoice. So another rule that's also possible is to import the payment terms from the vendors from Business Central, or just use the terms that would be listed on the actual invoice and then add those 30 days on top of the date of the actual invoice. We'd then find the total amount, about almost $2,500, and then the currency in US dollars that would be based on how your vendor has been created inside Business Central. Now, when it comes to the lines themselves, what happens is that Yooz created those 3 different lines based on the previous coding habits from the users when it comes to receiving invoices from that specific vendors. Those columns that you see here, such as accounts, division, product, projects, those would be reflecting and mirroring the dimensions that would be living inside your Business Central application. Now, if I wanted to make any changes from a GL perspective, I would have the option to do it. And then if I wanted to, and let's say all of a sudden I wanted to code it to a 4th line, I could just simply add a line, select down. Now it's going to go to, let's say, miscellaneous. And then I would want to keep it simple and split the total amount evenly across all the lines. So I could just grab my total amount, divide it by 4, since we have those 4 lines, press on the arrow, and then it would split it evenly across all the different lines. Now, the idea for me to show you this is now we can leave a comment to maybe our manager just to let them know that we made some changes in the coding because something specific did happen. So I could click on the comment section, tag a specific user, and tell them I made some changes in the coding. Now, when I submit this comment, what happens is that the user that was tagged is going to be receiving notification, as well as this comment that was left. It's going to be recording any audit trail and cannot be deleted or modified. So this is going to be great material to provide someone that we need to do some digging. Also, in the event that you may have to add any supporting documents to an invoice, it is possible by just drag and dropping any piece of data that you want onto an invoice. Just by clicking on the little plus, you'd be able to drag and drop any piece of data. Could be pictures, could be videos, could be audios, screenshots, etc. Now, if you're happy with the way the invoice was coded, all you'd have to do is to go ahead and submit it for approval. And once this is done, Yooz is going to ask you if you wanted to remember this data for the next times. If I say yes, then that means we'll have those 4 lines by default. And then it will move on to approval. Now, when it comes to approval, what we wanted to do is to keep it super simple. So I'm just going to impersonate an approver. And then I'm going to show you 2 things, simply how to approve a single invoice as well as doing a batch approval. So if I want to approve a single invoice, which is the one that we just worked on a second ago, here we would be able to find again the actual picture of the invoice that we received. the data that was extracted, as well as the comment that was left. However, the accounting specialist actually did code the invoice, and either I would approve it, and then if I'm the last approver, it would then go inside Business Central and create those accounting entries, or I could send it back to the accounting specialist if I needed them to make a change. Else, I could always forward it to someone else in the organization that is not part of the workflow if I want to have their take on it, and maybe they can complete an action for me. So here I'm just going to go approve. Assuming with the last approver, he would then be creating the accounting entries inside Business Central. Else, he would be moving to the next person in queue that needs to approve. Other than that, I could do a batch approval. So select all the invoices ready to approve. If I wanted to, I could have a little preview of the actual document. And then, there you go. I would find my actual invoice. I'd be able to zoom on it. There you go. And see what was extracted from the invoice, what was the coding going to be like. And then that's only something I would do if I want to have a little closer look to the invoices before I approve them as a batch, process them all, and then they would move on to the next step. Now, lastly, what I want to show you would be the document search in the reporting. So in order to do so, we have the search function on the very top. Here, we'd be looking at every document that got inside the platform in the last 12 months. But if I wanted to, I could add a criteria such as a total amount. Now I could select what criteria do I want to have. We'll say maybe greater or equal to $500. Then I can create my search, and I have all those results. Now, if I just remembered an actual keyword, I could just type my keyword, and then it would return the actual result wherever we have that keyword on the document. Once I'm happy with a report, or sorry, a search, I would be able to save it as a favorite, receive a notification every time one of those documents is hitting the platform, or share with other folks in the organization. I would say for the email notification, it is very valuable because I know some CFOs that would want to be aware as soon as, let's say, a $100,000 invoice gets inside a company before even they have to approve it, they know that something just got inside the system. So that's something that would be able to keep track of. And then lastly, the last thing that I wanted to show you was the Yooz reports. So all the data that flows inside Yooz can be extracted and then either fed inside Power BI, or else we'd have some dynamic Excel reports that would be based on the searches that we have and that you'd be able to keep track of. So here, for example, if you wanted to keep track of how long it's taking you guys to process an invoice for a single supplier, maybe you can see on the left-hand side that some of the suppliers are way higher than the baseline. So either they're not providing you all the data that's required, or maybe the process that you currently have in place is not efficient enough, so you may not be able to capture any early discounts payments, or maybe experiencing any penalties for late payments as well. For the people using purchase orders, that's also something you'd be able to keep track of. All the current purchase orders that would be open that an invoice hasn't been received for, so you know that expense will have to be recorded at some point. Also very interesting to look at. Or another example could be the good received not invoiced. And then lastly, I'll just show you regarding the budgets. If you were to create a budget inside Yooz and tag some expenses against that budget, you'd be able to keep track of what was initially planned, what was invoiced, if you went over budget. Same thing with the forecasting, or even analyzing a budget from a year against a different year as well. So we have probably about a dozen, I would say, of reports that would be out of the box that are available, but a lot of them can be configured during implementations for any specific needs for each and every business. I think I kept it to 15 minutes, but that's all I had to present you for today. Now, if you'd like to know a little bit more, happy to answer any questions in the chat, or do a one-on-one meeting later this week or early next week to tell you a little bit more about the platform and understand what you guys are looking for.